Okay, thank you very much. So this is the final presentation of the day, other than the roundtable that's coming up. We have monopolized this session, but not intentionally. This was so we had a parallel slot filled initially, but it was cancelled. So, in a way, as Carolin put, we keynotified this session. So anyway, there were, as you can see, there were 4 names listed here. Sascha, unfortunately, is not with us, but more importantly, even among the crowd, there are numerous researchers who participated and will be listed in the end, because this is a very European-wide and even wider effort. And without many researchers in the room and not present here, this wouldn't be possible at all. And in the spirit of this multi-research effort, we divided this presentation in 3 parts. So myself, Robert, and Carolin will present the relevant parts. So let me start with a bit of background. So what led us to do this European survey on dictionary use is that when you look at the literature, there was really no comparative surveys that would cover several countries. There were, well, the Atkins-Varantola is the exception, but that one was even restricted to language journals in 4 countries, and there were no larger scale surveys in general. And normally some questions were reduplicated, and majority of research focuses on non-native language users, especially English, especially students, which is, well, we all know the reason. Normally is conducted by lecturers, professors at universities, and students are really easy to access. And then also there is some research on translators. Now, another reason is that if you look at the research, not a lot of research of this scale has been done recently, when the lexicographic lexicographic scene has changed quite a lot. And then also another reason of having increasingly multilingual Europe, which gives another dimension to such surveys. So when was the first meeting? Well, this goes to Scotland. It was a Scotlex, and I met Carolin and Sascha there, and I just happened to mention the idea, and we said, oh, let's have a dinner in an Indian restaurant, and let's talk this over. And Robert was sort of with us in spirit, because we kept sending him emails. So this is when we first started discussing this, and we sort of laid the idea, and then it got shaped, and we said, well, how will we go about doing this? And this, a great part of the whole sort of credit goes to the NL sort of European network for eLexicography, because through that network we got to know all sorts of researchers from different countries. So immediately you knew that you just contact those people and you have several countries covered. Before, I don't know if that would have been possible. So we wanted to use, of course, the survey method, because that was the quickest way to get to people, but we wanted to avoid the shortcomings as much as possible. Because always people say, well, yes, questionnaire can be used to research dictionary use, but there are so many shortcomings, and you need to be aware of that going in. And we wanted to cover as many user groups as possible, so not students only, and you will see we were quite successful with that, but also non-users, which means that if somebody answers, I'm not really using dictionaries, you still have questions that are relevant for them. Because, and sort of that's the last point here, we want to focus on the attitude towards dictionaries. And these topics were discussed within the NL action several times. So how do people perceive dictionaries nowadays? Do they see them only, sort of dust collectors on the shelves, or is there any other sort of value attributed to them? And we focused on monolingual dictionaries, because that was also one of the foci of the NL at that point, and we had to limit the survey somehow. So this is the core group that, myself, Robert, Carolin, Sascha, and Maria, we worked on the initial survey. And then there were 29 country partners with 58 researchers. The full list will be displayed in the end, but it's also available on the NL website. Now, we started, we used the modern technologies, like Google Drive and whatever, but in fact, when we got and sit down, this was the method first used. So let's put something on this blackboard, and we started, first day, a couple of questions, then we went in the afternoon off each to our own hotel or home, came back the next day, and we again discussed, and I mean, just the usual process, but I remember taking this picture, and I never thought, when looking back, it was so interesting viewing. So, how did we develop the survey? First, it was funded by the NL STSM, sort of short-term scientific mission. So I went to Mannheim for 5 days. Robert was there as well. And we divided the survey into two parts. So first was the general part, which was translated into all the languages that were involved in the survey. And then to make the survey more interesting and relevant for the researchers, we allowed them to include 5 questions they would ask. So something that interested them in their particular country. Maybe if the questions were so specific that couldn't be included in this general part. So everything was programmed into Unipark, and this was Sascha's hard work. And then we started with the promotion. So this is again where local partners had a lot of work to do. And we set 2 minimums. So one was a recommended minimum that we ideally wanted. This was 250 participants. And the other one was a required minimum. So 100 at least, so we could make some sort of comparison. Unfortunately, in the end, 3 countries didn't make the cut. But those data are still useful and will be sent to researchers, and maybe if we do a second round, we can get to the comparability level. So, how successful were we? Well, it started on May the 8th, and it was open until July 9th, and we got nearly 10,000 responses. As you can see, it was a pretty sort of steady rise. People were sort of promoting it on and on. The response rate was about 67%, if I remember correctly. So out of those people coming to the survey website, 66 completed the survey. And it was an interesting thing. Sort of Sascha was sending updates every week. So it was like a Eurovision contest, First there were Estonia was in the lead, and then next week, really interesting, because in a way it prompted the countries that were behind to get the promotion going, and I think in the end that also contributed to the success. And well, this is where I hand over to Robert to give you a bit of preview.
Thank you. As you can see from the last data, we only started collecting data like 8 or 9 weeks ago. So with the immense volume of data that we haven't gone very deep into data analysis yet, but we just wanted to show you some, well, let's call them teasers. Before we get to the substantive results, a few more words about the sample. This is the nearly 10,000, the geographical split. So you can see much of Europe is covered, and a bit beyond perhaps. This is the 26 countries. The darker the color, the larger the number of responses returned overall. To get a more detailed picture, here's a bar chart which, beyond the numbers or the proportion of the total sample, also includes, as you can see, a split into 3 broad categories of participants, because, as Iztok has pointed out, ideally we wanted good coverage of different types of users and even some non-users. But the 3 broad categories in this particular plot are students at any level, including primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of education, people holding jobs, and others. And as you can see, for some countries, the split is quite good. For instance, here or here. But in some cases, you have one type of user or participants clearly dominating the sample. As in Georgia, for instance, most of the participants happen to be university students. We are in the Netherlands, so we should perhaps look at the Netherlands. As you can see, this is the only country where a large majority of the participants are in the other category. That in itself is kind of intriguing, but if you wait 2 slides, I think much of the puzzle will be solved. So just a bit of suspense there. This is the age distribution overall. Well, something you would expect, but it disguises the fact that if you look at the individual countries, the age distributes differently, and sometimes quite dramatically so, between the different countries. And that's also the case for other we call them meta variables, the variables that are not the answers given about dictionaries. So profession and years of education. To take a closer look at the distribution of age, the dots for the specific countries indicate the mean age with standard errors. As you can see, our average participants was 38 years old or 39. And for most countries, the country mean was between 30-something and 50, but there are 2 outliers. Georgia, which I have already mentioned, you can see that in Georgia, this dot here at the bottom, under 25, because those were university students. So let's look at the Netherlands. Over 60, right? That's the mean age. So the other category is actually retired, people who are retired. So that's the sample. And this creates specific problems for the analysis because, well, let's just say we want to compare 2 countries, Georgia and the Netherlands. Well, we find some differences in the responses. And there's a problem. What do we attribute these differences to? Do we attribute these to the difference, the actual difference between the countries, or is it a difference that's motivated generationally? So we'll try to grapple with these problems, and we have some ideas about how to go about that, but there are limits to correcting for such gross discrepancies. Okay, so now first, substantive results. We'll start with, this is not yet about dictionaries, this is about digital devices. We asked our participants which devices they used on a regular basis. As you can see, people tend to use more than one, but the most popular one is the smartphone. Over 80% reported using the smartphone every day. On the other hand, when we asked them which format they use to consult their monolingual dictionary, then the top response was the computer, which includes a laptop or desktop. In second place, printed book, and the smartphone is only third with 37%. So this struck us right away, the difference that although people regularly use the smartphone, they tend to not to use the dictionary, not to use the smartphone for accessing the monolingual dictionary, but rather they tend to use the computer. So one explanation for this effect might be that perhaps monolingual dictionaries may not be available for mobile devices, and that in itself is true. It's truer for some countries than others, but it's not the whole story, because we asked this next question: which format of monolingual dictionary do you prefer? It's not about the use, but about the preference. What do you prefer? And again, the preference was even more dramatically for a computer-based format. Apart from the perhaps non-availability of some monolingual dictionaries via the smartphone, one possibility is that dictionaries are used a lot in the context in which people are engaged with the computer anyway, such as working or studying, and then it's convenient to continue using the computer. Now, the same two responses about the frequency of use of a dictionary on a specific device and the preference is now here broken down in these two plots by into age groups. The white ones are the younger users, and we were expecting some age-related differences, and there are some. Notably, you see that the paper, the print, tends to be used more by the older generations, which isn't surprising, and the reverse tendency is evident for the smartphone. However, overall, the differences are not all that striking. So perhaps the generational differences are overemphasized in people's perception. So digital natives are not all that different in their answers. Another very interesting question that we wanted answered was the image of the monolingual dictionary. But at this point, I want to hand over to my colleague Carolin, since she wants to draw some parallels with their earlier study of German users. Carolin.
Okay, thank you. So one of the main aims we had was focus on monolingual dictionaries, because this is nothing which has been done so far. So the first question we asked was, which of these characteristics are associated with the leading monolingual dictionary in your country? And to reach a broader set of people, this was the main reason why we conducted this questionnaire in all these national languages, because it would be much more easier to conduct it in English. So most people said that the leading monolingual dictionary is useful for the general public, but also 40% said it's a resource for special interests, which is a quite different picture. So that's not, oh, okay. So what? Sorry.
There we go.
No, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's not that clear picture which we gained here. So 40% also said that's a national symbol, the leading monolingual dictionary. And we try to focus more on that question because it's rather special. So here you see the plot of correlating the country size with the percentage of people who answered that their dictionary is a national symbol for them. So the idea behind this analysis is that we thought that smaller countries could tend to weight their national identity higher than bigger countries. But we see here there's no clear correlation. You see on the left side, these are small countries like Serbia, Slovenia, or Georgia, but it's not really a clear picture. So a colleague of us had the idea to combine the age of the country with the percentage of people who answered that it's a national symbol, but it's harder than we thought to determine the age of the country, especially for the old countries like the Netherlands, for example. So we think we could build two groups, so the very young countries and the older countries, but that's, yeah, just work in progress. And you see here, that's just an example for combining a meter variable, again, with answer behavior. We plan to do a lot more of analysis in this way because it's very interesting because we reached such a big sample of people. So, replicating older studies was also an aim of this questionnaire. And we asked, what would you find important in a monolingual dictionary of your language? I hope you can read these criteria on the bottom. And that's really a replication of an older study we conducted at the IDS in 2010, where we focused on online dictionaries. 700 people took part in 2010, and they said reliability of content is the most important criterion, and adaptability or multimedia features are rather unimportant. And so we thought 7 years have passed, maybe things have changed, but it's not the case. It's again reliability of content, which is the most important criteria, followed by up-to-date content and easy to use, and such things like user contributions or multimedia is rather unimportant in contrast. So we think, yeah, a dictionary should be good content wrapped in a skin which is easy to use, whatever that means. So we can remember on the talks on this afternoon for business models or which things Sylviane presented. So that's not clear from this result. So, and we also asked, is public financing of monolingual dictionaries a good idea? Also a thing which is rather important for most of us. So most people said, yes, it is important and it's a good idea because they are part of our cultural heritage or they help the public. But yeah, sure, that's just a corn-grained picture and just a nice general expression, we know. So, just our closing remarks. We have still a lot of analysis work to do. Especially some results and interpretation may need to be revisited in the light of local lexicographic state of the art. For example, the preference of formats. And maybe we do a potential second round with other countries if a lot of people are interested in. And as Iztok and Robert said, a lot of people were involved in the survey. And this is the last thing what we want to do is saying thanks to all who were involved. We see them here. So Sascha and me were rather skeptical at the beginning to conduct this questionnaire in such a short time, in such a lot of translations, but it worked really well. And so thanks for your effort and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Perfect timing. And we have now 5 minutes for questions, please. Yeah. So, microphone. So, here.
Thank you. This is a very interesting work. I'm glad to see that. I wanted to ask if you have checked your instrument for reliability.
What would you mean?
I mean, if you statistically proceeded your instrument, your questionnaire for its reliability. I mean, the results are reliable.
What you? So maybe you could come.
If you mean, we have mostly reused previously used questions, like for instance for socioeconomic status that are well established in the literature. So we saw no need for that. But at this we did not calculate formal measures of reliability, like I don't know, split reliability measures, something like that. No, we did not do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, some really useful material in here, I'm sure. The one thing that really surprised me was when people were rating what they liked about dictionaries. The two things was, one, links to a corpus, and two, corpus-based. But does anyone even know what a corpus is, apart from us?
So maybe I could answer that. So no, we don't know really. In the questionnaire we conducted in 2010, we made an experiment afterwards. We did a second questionnaire and showed the people examples of adaptive features and multimedia features and links to the corpus, and then asked them again to rate this. So the first group had to see examples before they are asked to rate these features, and the other afterwards. So, and then we saw the learning effect condition resolved better ratings for these features. So yeah, that's a right point.
Quite encouraging anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks. Did you specify which dictionaries you were talking about? So, you know, for the different countries, did you say, well, you know, Italy, we're talking about the Zingarelli or whatever, or did you just leave it up to people to decide which was the leading dictionary?
No, the answer is no. We didn't ask them we asked them to provide that, so that answer was open, so it wasn't, we couldn't list, it's a tricky thing, because if you can you exhaustively list all the possible dictionaries, also always a question. So this is where the questions of a general nature was like, we introduced what a monolingual dictionary in this particular survey is, and then people were answering in that respect.
And you asked them to name what they thought was their...
Yes.
Okay, that could be interesting as well.
Oh, well, yes.
Watch
just wait and see.
Thank you. Well, we have to congratulate you on a very interesting preliminary report. It looks really exciting. And I was wondering, will there be a press release or something printed so that we can begin to arouse interests in the final report?
Well, that's an excellent idea. This is the stage where we got the data, and so we all got from our holidays, and we said, well, we need to prepare something for eLex. Well, I'm not kidding. I remember when we were submitting the abstract, we were sitting down and say, well, can we even submit an abstract to eLex? Will we have something ready then? Because we didn't even have all the translations in, so we were they were looking at me because I was doing all the emailing. Will you be able to pull this off? And actually, in the end, everybody came through and we had the data. But this is one of the important things, and I think several people already mentioned this to me, that it's not only important in terms of international sort of publicity. On national levels, the results and the comparison will be highly relevant. So I think what we will do is we will sort of pool the ideas from all the local partners, because they would, well, you are part of the local partners, so they would be the best people to know what sort of action is needed within the country. And then also internationally we will use NL, we will use any other means that
I think I can promise you press coverage in Norway the minute there's an official half page of facts for a preliminary report.
Excellent. Yeah.
Well, last question.
So thank you very much. I really liked it. My question would be about Belgium. Clearly, I mean, this is a nation, 2 or 3 languages are spoken there. I mean, you also have Basque Country and Spain. So.
Do you want me to go into this? Really? No, I mean, this is in some countries. So Belgium, for example, we had French, right? And we used the Dutch translation. So luckily, we could use the Dutch translation, which was only inspected by people in Belgium. But in many countries, this was the problem. I mean, there were, when we first sent the questionnaire to local representatives, this was translation was one problem, but then this situation is not really typical of our environment. This would be how should we phrase this question differently? Now imagine this is 26 people sending. So at some point we had to make a compromise saying, okay, we need to stop here, because otherwise if I amend this question and send it to all 26 partners, and then I amend it again because of another suggestion, send it to 26 partners, of course they don't all reply in a single day. So then I don't think we would have been here today. Maybe next EUROLEX or next eLex maybe, but really it is complicated. But so we try to, we acknowledge this about the languages. Also we got reaction immediately after publishing the survey. So people who wanted to participate, so this is why Carolin mentioned the second round, because there are countries already interested in doing that. And I think at some point we might want to revisit that, even from around the world. So if you have a survey already done and you can translate it and then launch it, it's quite simple and you can get more data for comparison. But this was one of the tougher nuts we had to crack. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for getting into the details.